Good morning everyone, thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for clicking on this video. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Max. Welcome to my channel if you're new, and let's talk about some books. As you will be able to tell from the title of this video, we are doing a humongous book haul today. So if you haven't got one already, please feel free to pause this video and go and make yourself a heartwarming cup of tea or coffee or hot chocolate, and let's get into it. So as you all know, if you watched any of my Vlogmas videos, or there's a few of my Vlogmas videos where I talked about this, I went to France to spend Christmas in my parents' house in France with my family. And the majority of my belongings are stored there in that house in France. If you want more context or explanation around this, I talk about it quite a bit in some of my other videos. But basically, where I am in England at the moment, I'd kind of read all the books that I had with me. So I was really excited to go back to France and swap out some of my books and bring back a load more with me. So that is what we're hauling today. I'm so excited. We have a very big mixture of fiction and non-fiction, a few classics, I think one poetry, and I think the ratio of fiction to non-fiction is quite even, actually, which is unusual for me. So yeah, I won't talk much about each book because there's so many to get through, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with the fiction because that's what I have right here next to me. So I'll start off with what I'm currently reading, which is, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful to look at, Philip Pullman's The Book of Dust, Volume 2. I read Volume 1 of this series a couple of years ago, but also at Christmas time, which is cool because I've ended up starting to read the second one around Christmas time too. But anyway, I've been wanting to read this for ages. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in a previous video as well, actually, that I wanted to get around to reading this, but it's so chunky. How many pages is this? I'm pretty sure it's like 600 pages. 687 pages. I'm currently on page 293, so I'm not yet halfway, but it's so good so far. I love His Dark Materials universe, and so this has been on my TBR for yonks. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to speak about each book very much, but it's Philip Pullman, so. Speaking of Philip Pullman, I decided to reread Northern Lights. This is the first book in the His Dark Materials trilogy. I read this when I was in kind of middle school, I think, or early high school, and loved it, and I have loved this universe ever since. And I've never reread them, so I wanted to start a reread, so I found this in a second-hand English bookshop in France because I can't find my original copies of this series, so I'm going to be looking out for the second and third book in the His Dark Materials trilogy so that I can carry on reading these, even though I'm kind of doing it in a weird order because I'm on the Book of Dust now, which is like 15 years later than these books, but never mind, I don't care. Next book we have All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. I have been meaning to read this for yonks. I purchased this years ago. I believe it's a memoir and it's very LGBTQ plus focused. It's such a beautiful cover as well. I think it's so stunning. On the back it says, "Be bold and brave and queer," which I love. The first part of the synopsis says, "This is the story of George Matthew Johnson. This is a story for us all." In his groundbreaking young adult memoir, prominent writer and LGBTQ plus activist George M. Johnson shares both glorious and gut-wrenching memories of growing up black and queer in America. So I think it's such an important story to read. Yeah, I'm really excited to get to this. And I've just realised I said that I was doing the fiction section, and all of the books that I have here are fiction, apart from this one must have been put in the wrong pile. Next we have a couple that I already talked about in I think my last video of Vlogmas, and that is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. I have such a sentimental attachment to this book because my great-grandparents bought it for me when I was about 11, I think, and I read it at the time and loved it, and it is about an autistic kid. And so I just think at this time in my life. I'm nearly 30 and I've known that I'm autistic for the last 2 or 3 years, and so I'd really like to reread this with that knowledge and that framework of knowing so much more about what it's like to be autistic in the world. I think it'll be really interesting to reread. Another one I've already talked about in Vlogmas was The Betrayals and also The Binding, both by Bridget Collins. Bridget Collins? Yeah, Bridget Collins. I absolutely flipping loved these books, especially The Binding. There is some queer representation in here as well, which is always a bonus for me. I'm so excited to reread these. They are, I would say fantasy, but I'm not 100% sure because I think they are also a little bit historical fiction-y. They're certainly not set in this day and age, but they're also not set in this world. So really, really interesting and fun and adventurous and magical. Next one I grabbed is another reread for me, but it's In the Distance There Is Light by Harper Bliss. Harper Bliss is a pretty well-known author in the sapphic romance genre, and I read this a couple of years ago and absolutely loved it. I remember absolutely loving it, but I don't remember anything that happens. So I'm excited to read this because it's quite rare for me to find a romance that I actually love reading. So this should be fun. The first bit of the synopsis says, 2 women lose the man they love. All they have left is each other. Sophie's life is turned upside down when her partner Ian dies in a tragic accident. The only one who can understand her devastation is Ian's stepmother, Dolores. Together they try and make sense of their loss and rebuild their shattered lives. I remember it being really beautiful as a love story, but not too intense and sad. Obviously it's very sad, but I am quite sensitive to the sadness and the tragic side of things, and I remember this not being too much for me, which is great. Next is a book that I actually purchased while in France. There are 2 or 3 of these, I think, that I bought from an English bookshop in France when I was in Perigord, but most of these were from my storage boxes or were given to me for Christmas. But anyway, this one is Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This series of books, because I think there's 3 of them, yeah, has been on my radar for a few years. I remember a booktuber talking about this series, I think it was Emmy, and it really intrigued me because of the format. This is young adult, I believe, science fiction. The beginning of the synopsis says, the year is 2575 and 2 mega corporations are at war over a planet that's little more than an ice-covered speck. But the really interesting thing about this series is what it looks like on the inside. There's so much like transcripts of recorded conversations and documents and images. It just seems like a really fun, immersive read. And bonus points from me, look how floppy it is. I love it when a book is floppy. It's just so good. Look at that. Perfect. Perfect level of floppiness. I'm actually gonna do now the other 2 that I purchased from that same English bookshop in France, and they are Cryer's War by Nina Varela and All of You, Every Single One by Beatrice Hitchman. Now, Cryer's War, again, is another one that's been on my radar for ages because it is a female-female relationship, I believe, but it's also fantasy, and what I'm learning more and more about myself is I actually really enjoy fantasy. And so I have been wanting to read this for ages. I'm a little bit skeptical because I don't want it to be too sad, but I think I will end up loving it. There's a sequel to this as well, I believe. But the synopsis says, impossible love between 2 girls, 1 human, 1 maid. A love that could birth a revolution. After the War of Kinds, the automae, designed to be the playthings of royals, usurped the estates of their owners and bent the human race to their will. Now Ayla, a human servant rising in the ranks at a sovereign's house, dreams of avenging the death of her family by killing the sovereign's daughter, Lady Crier. It sounds super intriguing and I'm excited. And then All of You, Every Single One was one that my sister actually spotted in the bookshop and pointed it out to me, thinking that it might be my kind of thing. This is another female-female relationship. It says, when Julia leaves her husband for the handsome tailor Yves Perret or Perret, who knows, she expects her life to be a challenge. The year is 1911 and the women flee to Vienna, hoping to begin a new life together. They find a home and start to settle in, befriending their flamboyant neighbour Rolf and their motherly landlady, Frau Bernd. But Julia longs for a child, and this longing seems poised to destroy their happiness. Again, hoping it's not going to be too sad, but I'm always up for reading more representation that resonates for me, so we love a female-female relationship romance. Even though I'm not a female, I'm non-binary, but we still love to see it. These next two books are ones that I got for Christmas, and they're actually the only fiction books that I got for Christmas that I brought back with me, because I think I got about another 4, but I read them while I was in France already, so I didn't bring those back with me. But the ones that I did bring back that I haven't read yet are Isaac and the Egg by Bobby Palmer. This one, both of these my sister got me for Christmas. And this one seems like a super heartwarming story. It says, it is early. A young man stands on a bridge and lets out a heart-wrenching scream. From deep in the woods, something screams back. It sounds improbable, but this is how Isaac meets the egg. The two are unlikely companions, but their chance encounter will transform Isaac's life in ways he cannot yet imagine. I'm super intrigued. It sounds very literary fiction-y and maybe a bit magical realism and weird and strange, but also full of love. So, yay. And next is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I can't believe I haven't read this yet, but I'm really excited to. I remember this book coming out and how stunning the hardback cover was. Oh my gosh, I'm so surprised I didn't end up buying it while it was still in hardback before the paperback came out, because the hardback cover, I was just obsessed with it every time I saw it. I wish the paperback cover was the same, but it's not. It's a different iteration of the design. Anyway, that's my artistic self getting overexcited about design. But this is a book that is about a relationship between two people. It says, this is the story of Sam and Sadie. It's not a romance, but it's about love. When Sam catches sight of Sadie at a crowded train station one winter morning, he is catapulted back to the brief... A child just screamed outside. He is catapulted back to the brief time they spent together as children. Their unique spark is instantly reignited. What comes next is a story of friendship and rivalry, fame and creativity, betrayal and tragedy, perfect worlds and imperfect ones, and ultimately our need to connect, to be loved and to love. I've been kind of hesitant to begin this because even though it doesn't actually look that big, I've heard that it feels a lot longer than it actually is to read because it takes place over such a long period of time. It's 478 pages, which is chunky, but it's not too bad. Anyway, I'm excited. I'm gonna end up saying I'm excited after every time I talk about a book. Next we have The Shattered Lands by Brenna Nation. I purchased this maybe a year or so ago and didn't end up getting around to reading it. It's a fantasy romance, I believe. Yeah. It says 18 years after her disappearance, the heir to the crown has returned. When an ominous vision transports Sapphire to a new world, she awakens with a legacy to fulfill. She is the lost princess and must carry on the line of the blessed queens. She has much to learn, but soon Sapphire's curiosity turns to the hidden dark history of her kingdom. Answers are not easy to come by until she meets a mysterious shadow witch who has knowledge to share. It sounds really fun. Next is one that has been so hyped that my demand avoidance has avoided reading it for ages, and that is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. So many people love this book. I believe it's a dark academia type of secret society, magic type of world, which are all things that I love to read. It's another chunky one, so I suppose that's another reason why I haven't started it yet, but I'm looking forward to getting to this and to seeing how I actually feel about it, because it's so hyped. Now this is one that I randomly found on a bookshelf in the French house that I'm assuming was my mum's, and I brought it back with me to read because it sounded intriguing, and that's 8 Detectives by Alex Pavesi. It says, all murder mysteries follow a simple set of rules. In the 1930s, Grant McAllister, a mathematics professor turned author, worked them out, hiding their secrets in a book of crime stories. Then, Grant disappeared. Julia Hart has finally tracked him down, but she wants to know what happened to him. But she's about to discover that a good mystery can be murder to solve. It just sounds like one of those murder mystery books that doesn't take itself too seriously and is kind of humorous. I hope that's what it is anyway, because those are my favourite type of murder mysteries. Next we have another super duper popular one, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six. Another one that was a gift from my sister, but this was a gift from my sister on my last birthday, I think, so nearly a year ago now. The only other Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I have read was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and obviously I loved that. So I'm looking forward to getting to this. I've kind of avoided it, to be honest, because I loved Evelyn Hugo so much that I didn't want to read this and for it to fall flat after loving Evelyn Hugo so much. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Now we have the Dante Club, which, bonus points, is another floppy one. This is by Matthew Pearl, and I think it's another kind of dark academia type mystery thing. It says, Boston 1865, a series of murders, all of them inspired by scenes in Dante's Inferno, which for me that first sentence just sounds really compelling anyway, but it carries on. Only an elite group of America's first Dante scholars can solve the mystery. With the police baffled, more lives endangered, and Dante's literary future at stake, the Dante Club must shed its sheltered literary existence and find the killer. It just seems like a really cool concept. Next we have Terry Pratchett's Equal Rights. I have been meaning to get to this for years. As you can tell, that's kind of a theme for me. Basically, I believe this is the 3rd novel in the Discworld series, but it's the first novel to read the Witches books of the Discworld series, and they're the ones that I originally wanted to start with. But now that I'm thinking about it, actually, I feel like if I'm going to start the Discworld series, I should actually start from the beginning. So I might end up purchasing the first 2 books if I can find them secondhand, and then carry on with this. I really have a feeling that when I eventually get to reading the Discworld series, I will absolutely love it. I feel like it's going to be one of those series where I'll just really enjoy it and I'll be able to get so immersed and I'll just love the world of it, I think, once I get into it. So yeah, that's Equal Rights. Next we have Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I remember when this came out and it was so hyped and people loved it and still love it, and I was really intrigued by it because it's quite magical realism and a really intriguing concept. The start of the synopsis says, in a small back alley in Tokyo, there is a cafe which has been serving carefully brewed coffee for more than 100 years. But this coffee shop offers its customers a unique experience, the chance to travel back in time. It's also not very long, it's only just over 200 pages, so I feel like if I'm in the middle of a series and I want a break from that world, or if I've read something intense and I need something lighter or like a bit of a palate cleanser, this book will be perfect for that. And lastly, for the fiction section, we have Record of a Spaceborne Few by Becky Chambers. This book was gifted to me by my friend, who did not realise at the time that it was the 2nd book in a trilogy, I think it's a trilogy. So I really want to get around to getting the 1st book of this series so that I can read this, because it really does sound like something that I would enjoy. I believe it's sci-fi. Yeah, it's science fiction, so I'm excited to get into this series because I do think I'll really like it. Okay, so many books. Okay, that's all of the fiction section. Now let's get in. Oh no, actually, that's a lie. We have some classics type stuff. So I'm gonna squidge these back on the windowsill. 2 over there. So we have 7 classics. The first one is Tennessee Williams's A Streetcar Named Desire. I have read this numerous times before, but the reason why I brought it back with me and why I'm so excited to reread it is because I found on Audible a full cast, like radio play style reading of this with Audra McDonald in it. And I love Audra McDonald as a musical theatre nerd. If you're into musical theatre at any capacity, I'm sure you know who Audra McDonald is. So I really wanted to bring the physical copy back with me so that I could read along with that. I studied this at A-level English and absolutely loved it. I also loved, and I'm sure I'll watch it again after reading this, I loved the National Theatre version of this. It has Gillian Anderson in it, so it's going to be brilliant, obviously. The next classic we have is James Joyce's Dubliners. I was gifted this, I think by my mum actually, for my birthday last year, and I never got around to it. And I think now that I've gotten into the swing of reading with audiobooks, I feel like that will make this book so much more accessible to me, because it's so much easier for me to lose focus and not be able to absorb what I'm actually reading when it's a classic. So I feel like reading this with an audiobook will be great. Oh, and also this is a short story collection. The back says, this collection of 15 stories presents a mosaic of Dublin life at the beginning of the 20th century. Each of the stories reveals moments of epiphany in the lives of a cast of Dubliners. Which, I love the idea of that concept, that all these short stories are moments of epiphany. It just sounds like it really entices me to know what these stories are about. So that should be cool. Next we have Anne of Green Gables. I can't believe I've never read this. I started watching the Netflix show Anne with an E at the beginning of last year and really enjoyed it. I don't think I ever finished it actually, but ever since I've been really inspired to read the actual book. And I believe I found this actually in one of those cute little village libraries that they have in telephone boxes now in England, which is just so cute. And it's like mass market paperback size, which I usually enjoy. So I'm excited to get to this. Next we have one that I got for Christmas this year, which is Emily Dickinson's Letters. I have been wanting to read Emily Dickinson and have been keeping my eye out for Emily Dickinson poetry and letters for probably a couple of years now. I honestly don't know what it is. I just feel like I'm going to end up loving her work. The letters especially really intrigue me, and the way that she lived her life as almost a recluse in her family home really intrigues me. But also her connection with nature and creativity, and the way that she talked about how her poetry came to her. I don't know, the whole creative process behind how she wrote really intrigues me, and the connection to nature is another thing that I feel like will really resonate for me when I read her stuff. So it's such a beautiful little book as well. I believe this is an Everyman's Library. Yeah, Everyman's Library Pocket Poets edition. I mean, look at the back, it's so pretty. Stunning. Next we have Peter Pan. This is a beautiful edition. It was, again, another gift, and I think I read it at the time, but I'd like to do a reread, and I'd like to see if I can find an audiobook read by someone who I think I'll enjoy listening to. This copy is stunning as well. It's a collaboration with the V&A. So the background, like, pattern design is William Morris, and I just think it's so pretty. I love this colour as well. And lastly, for the classics, we have Bram Stoker's Dracula. I've heard it said that if you want to get into reading classics, you should read either Frankenstein or Dracula, and Recently, again on Audible, I found an audiobook of Dracula, I think read by Tim Curry. I need to check this. Yeah, it's a full cast and it's read by Alan Cumming and Tim Curry, which just sounds like the most glorious combination of humans, and I feel like it will make reading a classic so much more accessible and enjoyable. So I brought this back with me because of wanting to listen to that audiobook. Next we have a poetry collection, and that is Felicity by Mary Oliver. I read this a few years ago and loved it, and I don't remember poetry that well when I read it, so I'm going to reread this because I do love Mary Oliver. I think it will probably inspire me to want to read more of her as well, because as I was saying with Emily Dickinson, the whole inspired by nature type of poetry really resonates with me, and I really enjoy it a lot more than other types of poetry. So I know I already love this. Okay, it's her love poems. I had totally forgotten that. So on the back it says, "If I have any secret stash of poems anywhere, it might be about love, not anger," Mary Oliver once said in an interview. Finally, in Felicity, we can immerse ourselves in Oliver's love poems. Here, great happiness abounds. It's just going to be lovely. Okay, now we have the big old non-fiction section. There's quite a few of them. Actually, I think there's more non-fiction here than there was fiction. I'm so excited about so many of these. So the first one I want to talk about is We Can Do Better Than This. 35 Voices on the Future of LGBTQ+ Rights. And this is a combination of essays, I believe, by lots of different people. The back says, "How do we shape a better world for LGBTQ+ people? In We Can Do Better Than This, 35 voices, actors, musicians, writers, artists and activists, answer this vital question at a time when the queer community continues to suffer discrimination and extreme violence. Through deeply moving stories and proactive new arguments on safety and visibility, dating and gender, care and community, they present a powerful manifesto for how, together, we can change lives everywhere." I just hope it's going to be very hopeful. So that's We Can Do Better Than This. The next one is How to Stay Sane in an Age of Division. This is one of those tiny penguin, I don't know what they're called actually. Welcome collection, it says. It's not even penguin, I don't know why I thought it was penguin. It says welcome collection. Anyway, I've always thought this would be a good one for like a train journey type of day, like if I'm traveling anywhere, if I just want something to read in my handbag or whatever. I don't really carry a handbag. Anyway, the back says, "Ours is the age of contagious anxiety. We feel overwhelmed by the events around us, by injustice, by suffering, by an endless feeling of crisis. So how can we nurture the parts of ourselves that hope, trust and believe in something better? And how can we stay sane in this age of division?" Again, another one that I hope will be like inspiring and hopeful. Next we have Recollections of My Non-Existence by Rebecca Solnit. I definitely talked about this in my last Vlogmas video where I was going through one of my boxes that I had in France while I was there. I think Rebecca Solnit is just a genius thinker, and one of my goals is just to read more of her writing, because she's just one of those people who I feel like her belief systems and the way that she thinks and writes resonates so much for me that I feel like anything of hers would be super intriguing. The first part of the synopsis says, "An electric portrait of the artist as a young woman that asks how a writer finds her voice in a society that prefers women to be silent." I just think her intelligence and her viewpoint and perspective around this is going to be really interesting. Next is Untypical: How the World Isn't Built for Autistic People and What We Should Do About It. I love that subtitle. This is by Pete Warmby, and it is a well-known book in the sphere of books about autistic people and books about autism in general. I also feel like Pete Warmby is going to be one of those people who doesn't take himself too seriously, and therefore I'm hoping it's going to be quite humorous as well as being about such a serious topic. The synopsis says, "The modern world is built for neurotypicals. Needless noise, bright flashing lights, small talk, phone calls, unspoken assumptions and unwritten rules. It can be a nightmarish dystopia for the autistic population. So true. In Untypical, Pete Warmby lays bare the experience of being different, explaining with wit and warmth just how exhausting it is to fit in a world not designed for you. I just feel like I'll feel so seen to read this book. Next we have Mother Earth Spirituality, Native American Paths to Healing Ourselves and Our World. This really intrigues me because I've always been a super duper spiritual type of person, and I've delved into and learned a lot about a lot of different types of spirituality, and I was a Buddhist at one point. I've been really into earth-based religions for a long time, and so this, I'm hoping, will kind of reconnect me a bit to that side of myself. I feel like since being in autistic burnout and for the last few months navigating quite a tough period of time, the spiritual part of me and the part of me that feels really connected to my higher self and the universe and the fundamental aspects of what I believe about spirituality, I've been kind of disconnected from, and this is one of the books that I hope will reconnect me a bit to some of those belief systems and parts of myself. Next is kind of along a similar vein but also very different at the same time. This is Wild Therapy, Rewilding Our Inner and Outer Worlds by Nick Totten. Now, a few months ago, I got really intrigued and obsessed by the disparity between nature and culture. It was something that I was thinking about a lot. I was thinking a lot about our human nature as human beings and how culture has developed to be just something that is completely unnatural to our actual beings as humans. And so I picked this up during that time. It says, in today's Western industrialised society, wild has come to mean dangerous, savage, crazy, out of control. This book celebrates wildness, both in global ecosystems and in the human psyche. Totten argues that embracing unpredictability and boundlessness is vital for our well-being, and in these times of environmental crisis, for the survival of humans and other than humans. Drawing on psychotherapy, philosophy, ecology and anthropology, futuristic fiction and much other literature, he shows the links between domesticated civilization and the destruction of the innate balance of ecosystems, including human relationships and psyches. It just sounds so incredibly interesting to me, and I feel like it's going to resonate so much. I also just feel like, though, it might be a little bit dense in terms of the writing and information. I feel like it might be a little bit textbooky, so I'm probably gonna have to take my time with it. Next, we have something that is totally different. The Lost Lands by Lucy Cavendish, A Magical History of Lemuria, Atlantis and Avalon. I purchased this years ago when I was writing a fiction book for NaNoWriMo, and this book was a part of my research for that novel. At the time, I only read the parts of it that were pertinent to what I was trying to research, but actually I'm super intrigued to read the whole thing. On the back it says, in this daring book, Lucy Cavendish invites you to shed your doubts and join her on a wondrous soul pilgrimage, travelling through time and space to the planet's most mysterious and powerful lands, psychic societies and secret spiritual communities. It's quite, I want to say woo-woo, but woo-woo has such negative connotations. I don't know 100% if I truly believe that these places existed, but I just love pondering the prospect that they might have. And I feel like immersing myself in this will be really fun. It has some maps of the places in the front too, which is always a great addition to a book. We love a map. Okay, next, kind of along the same vein as Wild Therapy, is Think Like a Tree, The Natural Principles Guide to Life by Sarah Spencer. It says, nature holds the secret to your happiness, health and well-being. Now at last you can unlock it. We associate trees and woodlands with harmony, health and vitality, and yet so often we struggle to experience these qualities in our everyday lives. What if we could harness the wisdom of the forest for ourselves? Think Like a Tree is the first guide of its kind, reveals the underlying principles of nature's secrets of success one by one. These natural principles evolved over billions of years. They are the rules and patterns that all living things have in common for finding purpose, growth and success, solving problems, building resilience, creating ideal conditions to thrive, developing positive relationships and leaving a lasting legacy. It just seems like such a beautiful concept, and I really do believe this thing about the way that nature works and the world of nature having so much more wisdom about life and about the way we're meant to live as human beings, as natural beings, a part of nature, not a part of nature, that is worth contemplating and considering and listening to. I'm not a huge fan of this cover, I must say, and that stopped me from picking this up. I love the trees. This is so beautiful, but I'm not a fan of this font. I can be a bit of a font snob sometimes, I must say. It's not something that I like very much about myself, but it's true. I'm biased towards the sexy fonts. Next, we have Looking After Your Autistic Self by Neve Garvey. Neve Garvey? Yes, Neve Garvey. It says a personalised self-care approach to managing your sensory and emotional well-being. I need this book. My autistic coach actually recommended this to me because of the whole section about sensory health. Sometimes I really struggle with my sensory experience, and so I'm really intrigued to go through this and kind of learn more things about how I can best cater my environment to my neurology. I think this will be really valuable. Next, another nature themed one is The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wolleben, I want to say. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but the subtitle of this is What They Feel, How They Communicate, Discoveries from a Secret World. I just really wish I knew more about trees in general. They fascinate me. When I used to be on Instagram, I'm not really on Instagram very much anymore. Every so often maybe. It's not on my phone anymore, but when I used to be on Instagram, I used to follow Britt Marling, who is the creator and writer of the OA TV show, if you've seen that. If you haven't seen that, please check it out. It's flipping genius. I think so anyway. But I used to follow Britt Marling, and she posted about this book on Instagram stories, I believe, and I think I purchased it then, but I'm really intrigued. It says, in The Hidden Life of Trees, Peter Wolleben makes the case that the forest is a social network. He draws on groundbreaking scientific discoveries to describe how trees are like human families. Tree parents live together with their children, communicate with them, support them as they grow, share nutrients with those who are sick or struggling, and even warn each other of impending dangers. Wolleben also shares his deep love of woods and forests, explaining the amazing processes of life, death and regenerations he has observed in his woodlands. I always want to feel more connected to nature, and I feel like this will just warm my heart to read about. Oh, the next one I'm really excited about. This is Demon Voices by Philip Pullman. This is Philip Pullman's kind of book about writing, basically. The subtitle is Demon Voices on Stories and Storytelling. The back says, oh, and it's really floppy too, so bonus points to Philip Pullman for that. The internationally best-selling author of the His Dark Materials trilogy provides a spellbinding journey into the narratives that have shaped his vision, his experience of writing, and the keys to mastering the art of storytelling. I just am so intrigued to hear what this man has to say about writing and storytelling, because I love the worlds he creates so much. I feel like I'm going to value this a lot. I do feel though like it's one of those books where the pages are slightly thinner than a normal page, so I think this is actually going to be a lot chunkier than it looks. Yeah, It's 433 pages long, but when you look at it, it looks like about 300 pages. Anyway, I'm super excited for this. Next, we have a good old classic for me, and that is The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. As I said earlier, I used to be a Buddhist, and before I became a Buddhist, I read this for the first time. When I next read this, it will be my third read of this book, but I really feel like at this point in my life, I need to reread this. It says, in this unique and important book, one of the world's great spiritual leaders offers his practical wisdom on how to overcome everyday human problems and achieve lasting happiness. The Art of Happiness is a highly accessible guide combining the Dalai Lama's Eastern spiritual tradition with Dr. Howard C. Cutler's Western perspective. Howard C. Cutler is the guy who was interviewing the Dalai Lama when they wrote this book. They apply the principles of Tibetan Buddhism to every facet of life and reveal how one can find balance and complete spiritual and mental freedom. I'm really intrigued to see what my opinion of this book will be when I read it again, because it's been many years and there are reasons why I'm no longer a Buddhist. And so I'm intrigued to know what my opinions of this will be now. I still really value Buddhism, and I think I will still really value this book. But I'm just intrigued to see whether there are any parts of it that turn me off a little bit. But we'll see. I'm so ready at this point in my life to reread this again. Next, we have another book about writing, and that is Stephen King's On Writing. I started this a good few years ago, I believe. Yeah, I got to page 28 and I was really enjoying it at the time, and then I think I just got distracted by other books. But I love how the subtitle is A Memoir of the Craft. That just kind of oozes how much Stephen King has respect for the creative process of writing to me. Anyway, the back says there is a reason why Stephen King is one of the best-selling writers in the world, ever. Described in The Guardian as the most remarkable storyteller in modern American literature, Stephen King writes books that draw you in and are impossible to put down. Part memoir, part masterclass by one of the best-selling authors of all time, this superb volume is a revealing and practical view of the writer's craft, comprising the basic tools of the trade every writer must have. King's advice is grounded in his vivid memories from childhood, through his emergence as a writer, from his struggling early career to his widely reported near-fatal accident in 1999, and how the inextricable link between writing and living spurred his recovery. I'm just really intrigued to keep reading this and to absorb his valuable advice. One more book about writing, and that is Patricia Highsmith's Plotting and Writing Suspense Fiction. I have read this before and I'm going to read it again. I don't remember it. Another one that's great and floppy, and it's short. It's only 127 pages, but I remember finding a lot of value in this and I really want to get back into writing this year, as you can tell. So I'm looking forward to rereading this. Next is another one based around the autistic experience, and that is Odd Girl Out by Laura James. I've heard really good things about this and I think it's kind of more memoir style rather than like informational tips and stuff. It says, from childhood, Laura James knew she was different. She struggled to cope in a world that often made no sense. It wasn't until she reached her 40s that she found out why. Laura learned quite by chance that she is autistic, one of the 700,000 people in the UK diagnosed with autism. With touching and searing honesty, Laura challenges everything we think we know about what it means to be autistic. I just feel like this perspective is going to be really intriguing. I would say I'm classed as late diagnosed, as a person who was diagnosed autistic at the age of 28. But Laura James didn't find out she was autistic until she was in her 40s, so I'm intrigued to read about the perspective of what that was like. And lastly, one of the ones I'm most excited about is Rick Rubin's A Creative Way. No, The Creative Act. My bestie bought this for me for Christmas, not even knowing that this has been on my Amazon wish list for probably 2 years. I feel like this is going to be kind of reminiscent of Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. I hope it will be anyway, because I found Big Magic so flipping valuable to me. I'm really intrigued to hear Rick Rubin's thoughts and perspectives and stories and beliefs around creativity. And there we are, we're finally at the end of the haul. Thank you so much for joining me for this haul. I'm so excited for this year of reading and to get into so many of these books. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these and what your opinions have been and what you would recommend that I get into first. What do you think out of all of these books I should start with? I haven't created my TBR yet, so let me know what you think. Also, let me know down below, are you more of a fiction or non-fiction person? I would love to hear. I am more of a fiction person, but I like to think that I'm more non-fiction than I actually am. I buy more non-fiction books than actually read them. I'd like to get into the habit of rectifying that a little bit this year. As you can tell, I have a lot of non-fiction to get through, so let's see what happens. Cheers! Thanks for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.